Pain spreads slowly when a body has grown accustomed to it. In the summer of 1856, on a vast plantation carved into the red soil of Georgia, pain moved like a familiar shadow, never leaving, only changing its form. The day the curse was born began in the suffocating stillness of early afternoon, when the air felt dense enough to bite through and the sun pressed down like an accusation. Near the edge of the sugarcane fields, where the ground softened into a muddy bank beside a dark, stagnant pond, a young enslaved woman named Elsie lay curled on her side, her ribs rising and falling unevenly. Every breath was a jagged battle against the tightness gripping her chest. Her dress was torn and stiff with dried dirt from the fields. Sweat traced shining lines along her dark skin, yet her hands shook with a deeper, colder tremor. She knew what was happening. She had witnessed it before, the coughing fits, the fever that arrived and vanished like a cruel game. The slow draining of strength day after day, until even lifting a bucket felt like hoisting a house. Her lungs felt smaller, tighter, as if unseen hands were closing around them. Each gasp scraped her throat raw. She tasted iron. When she coughed, the dark red mark staining the ground confirmed her fear. Something inside her was breaking. If you want more stories like this, powerful historical narratives that expose the hidden brutality and resistance of the past, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Elsie's fingers clawed weakly at the earth, her nails digging into the damp soil. She was young, barely 20, but years of forced labor had etched a hard wisdom into her eyes. She had been born on this land, a property called Fairview, a name that sounded refined when spoken by white tongues over fine china and polished silver. But for those in the slave quarters, it meant something far different, a place where you might die without anyone remembering the sound of your laughter. Fairview belonged to Charles Whitfield, a plantation owner whose fortune was built on sugar, cotton, and the bodies that harvested them. His wife, Moran Whitfield, moved through the estate like a queen whose crown was forged from other people's suffering. She was not old, perhaps in her early 30s, with pale, carefully powdered skin and soft hands that had never known true labor. Yet there was something in her eyes, an icy detachment, an almost bored cruelty that made the enslaved people flinch when she passed. That afternoon, Moran's buggy rolled slowly along the path cutting between the fields and the pond, its wheels stirring lazy spirals of dust. She had insisted on a drive to escape the stifling heat inside the big house. The coachman, an older enslaved man named Isaac, kept his eyes forward, his hands steady on the reins, every muscle in his back tight whenever his mistress shifted. Beside Moran sat her younger sister Lydia, visiting from Savannah, curious and impressionable, always observing. "Stop," Moran said abruptly, her voice sharp. Isaac pulled the reins and the horse snorted, stamping the ground. Moran had noticed something. No, someone out of place on her immaculate property. There, near the water's edge, lay a figure curled like a discarded rag, shoulders jerking with each shallow breath. To Moran, the sight stirred no concern. It was an offense. "What is that girl doing?" Moran asked, her voice cool as ice water. Isaac swallowed. "Ma'am, that's Elsie. She's been sick. Overseer said she—" "I did not ask what the overseer said," Moran cut in. "I asked what she is doing." Lydia leaned forward, squinting. "She looks like she's dying," she murmured, almost to herself. "Dying." The word drifted through the heavy air and settled over the scene like dust. For a brief moment, something tight flickered in Moran's chest. Annoyance, not pity. Dying out here, where anyone could see her, as if misery had forgotten its proper place. "Get up!" Moran called out, lifting the hem of her tailored dress as if the sight of Elsie might stain it. Elsie heard the voice before she fully saw the face. Every nerve in her body screamed to obey, to force herself upright, to stand straight, to prove she was still useful. But her limbs felt like dead weight. She pushed with her arms, tried to roll onto her knees, and a blade of pain tore through her chest. Her vision blurred, sound warped and receded as if she were submerged underwater. With a strangled gasp, she collapsed back onto the ground. Marianne watched her fall as one might watch an animal fail to perform a trick, her lips curling. "They grow so lazy when they think they're about to leave this world," she said with a light laugh, turning slightly to Lydia. "Even death becomes an excuse." Lydia shifted uneasily, glancing between her sister and the dying girl. The laugh sounded wrong even to her, sharp and bitter as it echoed across the still water. Elsie heard it too. The laughter slid into her bones like a knife. Somewhere beneath the crushing weight of her illness, beneath years of orders, blows, and swallowed screams, something deep and ancient stirred. She lay there with her cheek pressed to the dirt, the taste of blood and grit mingling on her tongue. She could feel her heart stuttering, each beat slower than the last. Around her, the world narrowed to the burning in her lungs and the distant murmur of voices above. Then another sound rose in her memory, the soft, rolling timbre of her grandmother's voice. Not the grandmother recorded in ledgers and sale papers, but the one remembered through stories. A woman stolen from a village across the ocean long before Elsie was born. Her mother had repeated those stories in the darkest hours of night, when the overseer slept and the stars felt like watchful eyes. "Blood remembers," her mother would whisper as she braided Elsie's hair. "They can chain your body, child, but your spirit runs deeper than their fields. Your grandmother knew the old ways. She spoke to rivers, to ancestors, to the spaces between breaths. Hurt her children, and the world itself might turn against you." As a girl, Elsie had clung to those stories like a secret charm. But stories did not stop whips. Stories did not stop children from being sold. By 16, her faith had thinned into something fragile and distant. Life on Fairview crushed hope the way it crushed bodies, slowly and efficiently. And yet, as she lay there with her face in the earth, listening to a white woman's laughter drift above her while death crept closer, the stories no longer felt far away. They felt near, pressing in, waiting. Elsie tried to speak and choked instead. A violent cough tore from deep in her chest, racking her whole body. Warm liquid filled her mouth. When it spilled onto the ground, it was dark red. Lydia's hand flew to her throat. "Marianne, she's really not well. Perhaps we should send for—" "For what?" Moran's voice cut in, edged with irritation. "A doctor for her?" She let the question hang, as if its absurdity were obvious. "The doctor is for the house. They have each other. They are not my concern once they are no longer useful." Isaac's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He knew better than to speak when white anger simmered so close to the surface. He stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on a distant tree, forcing himself not to look at Elsie. Marianne flicked her wrist. "Isaac, get her on her feet. If she dies, she will not do it here where I have to look at her." Isaac hesitated just a moment too long. Marianne's gaze snapped to him. He climbed down from the buggy, his knees protesting as he landed. Slowly he walked to Elsie's side, his shadow falling over her. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain. For a brief instant their gazes met, two people bound by chains, one visible, one unseen. "Child," he whispered, barely moving his lips. "Try, please. If you don't, she'll—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. He slipped his hands beneath her arms, feeling the startling lightness of her body. She had always been thin, but now she felt almost hollow, as if sickness had eaten her from the inside. He lifted, trying to be gentle without drawing attention. Her feet dragged through the dirt. For a fleeting second she stood, swaying, her head drooping. Marianne watched, unimpressed. "She looks like a drunkard," she remarked, her mouth twitching. "Too weak to hold herself up, yet strong enough to waste an entire afternoon with this display." The laugh came again, soft, cold, and disdainful. It washed over Elsie like fire. Something inside her broke. Her knees gave way. She sagged in Isaac's arms, and he lowered her back to the ground before she collapsed completely. She rolled onto her back, staring up at the white sky. The edges of her vision darkened, closing in like curtains being drawn. She recognized the feeling. It was the crossing point between this world and whatever lay beyond. Her breath came in thin, ragged strands, but somewhere between one shallow gasp and the next, an unnatural calm settled over her. The pain did not vanish, but it sharpened, focused. It felt as though all her suffering, all her humiliation, every night she had cried silently into a thin blanket while her body ached from labor, were gathering into a single burning point inside her chest. The stories, her grandmother, the old ways. Elsie's lips moved at first without sound. Isaac leaned closer, thinking she was asking for water, for mercy, for something he could not give. Then the words came, not in English, but in a cadence older than the plantation, older than Marianne's family name, older than the nation itself. The syllables arrived in broken pieces, inherited through whispers, incomplete yet powerful. Marianne stiffened. "What is she saying?" Lydia asked, her voice small. Isaac's throat tightened. He recognized the rhythm, even if he did not know every word. It was the rhythm of prayers murmured over unmarked graves, of songs hummed to children to keep memory alive. "It's nothing, ma'am," he said quickly. "Just fever talk." But it did not feel like fever to Elsie. As she spoke, her voice steadied. The language was a patchwork of memory, some words true, some guessed, some replaced with English, but the intention behind them was fierce and clear. Her hands, weak moments before, clawed at the air, fingers curling as if weaving invisible threads together. "In the name of those taken from water and land," she whispered, eyes wide, fixed on a sky that felt suddenly close. "In the name of those who cried and were never heard. Hear me." Marianne shifted in her seat, irritation sliding into unease. "Make her stop," she snapped. "I will not have that noise on my land." But no one could stop her. The words had taken hold. Elsie's voice carried a strange authority, thin but sharp. "You laugh," she said, still staring upward, though everyone knew who she meant. "You laugh while I die. You laugh at my pain. You laugh at the work that broke my body. You laugh at the blood in my mouth. You laugh at my life like it is nothing." Marianne's fingers dug into her dress. "She is delirious," she said sharply, but the brittle edge in her tone betrayed her. Lydia's eyes darted between her sister and Elsie, caught in a fear she could not name. "You laugh," Elsie repeated, her voice cracking but unyielding. Tears slid from the corners of her eyes into her hair. "So let your laughter be taken. Let your joy turn to ash. Let your sleep be haunted by the faces you never saw as human. Let the sound of your own voice bring you no comfort." The air thickened. The faint breeze that had stirred the cane moments earlier died away, leaving the field breathless. Even the insects seemed to pause, as if the world itself were listening. Elsie drew another shuddering breath. The burning point in her chest flared, then spread outward, as though every nerve in her body ignited. She clung to the heat, pouring her rage and grief into it, shaping it with the last of her will. "By my blood," she whispered, barely audible, "and by the blood of my mother and her mother, and all who died with no one to speak for them." Her eyes rolled, but she forced them back, anchoring herself. "I bind you, Marianne Whitfield. As you have made others beg, so shall you beg. As you have watched suffering without mercy, so shall your heart be broken. Your hands will itch with helplessness. Your eyes will know tears. You will call for help and find none, not even in your own house." The final word left her on a breath more sigh than sound. Her chest rose once, twice, then with a long rattling exhale went still. Silence crashed down over the pond. For several seconds no one moved. Lydia's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Isaac knelt frozen, his hands hovering inches above Elsie's limp shoulders. The world felt distant, as if sealed inside glass. Marianne broke the stillness with a scoff that rang hollow. "Nonsense," she muttered. She wasted her last breath on foolish threats. Yet she could not shake the prickling at the back of her neck, the sense of being watched by something she neither saw nor believed in. Isaac bowed his head, murmuring a prayer. He did not fully understand what Elsie had done, but he felt its weight. He had heard stories whispered at night, of words that lingered after death, of curses born not from superstition, but from desperation deep enough to tear the veil between worlds. "Take care of that," Marianne said, gesturing vaguely at Elsie as if she were refused. "Bury her properly and make sure the others do not see her like this. They grow too attached to tragedy." She snapped open her fan and flicked it lazily. "Calm, Lydia. We are wasting the day." Lydia hesitated. "Marianne, what if—" "What if what?" Marianne cut in. "What if what she said does something?" Marianne laughed sharply. "Do you truly believe a dying slave girl has power over me? You read too many novels. This is the real world. Power is money, land, and law, not muttered nonsense in the mud." She gestured to Isaac. "Do as you are told." Isaac nodded silently, his eyes lingering on Elsie's face. In death, she looked peaceful, as if she had finally set down a burden heavier than her frail body. As the buggy rolled away toward the mansion, its sound fading, Isaac released a breath he hadn't known he held. "Child," he whispered, "whatever you called, I pray it finds its way, and I pray it doesn't burn us too." He laid a few fallen reeds over her hands, a small act of respect in a world that offered little. He knew he would soon have to gather others, dig a grave beyond the quarters where unmarked mounds rose like quiet accusations. But for a moment he stayed, kneeling, the weight of her final words pressing against his skin like humidity. From the fields, a few enslaved workers paused, squinting toward the pond. They had seen the buggy stop, seen Isaac lift and lower a limp form, seen the rigid posture of the white mistress against the sky. They needed no explanation. On plantations like Fairview, death arrived often, familiar, unwelcome, but never surprising. Still, this death felt different. As whispers crept through the rows of cane, Elsie gone, died by the water, she said something at the end, a new note threaded through the usual sorrow and resignation. Fear, yes, but also something else. A low, uneasy anticipation, as if the land itself were holding its breath, waiting for change. Letter over because her usually elegant handwriting came out shaky and uneven. By mid-afternoon her frustration had soured into something darker. She snapped at the housekeeper over a crooked curtain. She scolded a servant for bringing lemonade that was too warm. Every small flaw scraped against her nerves like grit. Yet beneath the anger was something she refused to name. Unease. That evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in streaks of red and orange, Marianne sat in the drawing-room with Lydia. Her sister had been quieter than usual all day, her gaze drifting now and then toward the windows as if she expected something to appear there. As the shadows stretched across the room, Lydia finally spoke. "Marianne, about yesterday, that girl by the pond." Marianne's jaw tightened. "What about her? The things she said before she died?" Lydia hesitated, weighing each word. "Do you think there could be anything to it?" Marianne let out a short laugh, sharp and dismissive, though it sounded forced even to her own ears. "You cannot be serious." "I'm not saying I believe it," Lydia said quickly, "but people talk about such things. Curses, hexes, old beliefs brought over from—" She crossed to the door and opened it slowly, peering into the dark hallway. The sound had stopped. Silence pressed in from every side, thick and suffocating. Marianne's hand tightened on the doorframe. She was about to retreat when she saw it, a flicker of movement at the far end of the hall near the stairs. A shadow darker than the surrounding dark, shaped almost like a person, yet wrong. Its edges blurred and shifted. Marianne's heart slammed against her ribs. "Who is there?" she demanded, her voice sharper than she felt. The shadow did not answer. It did not move. It simply stood, watching. For a long, breathless moment, Marianne could not move at all. Her body was rigid, her mind racing through explanations. A servant, a trick of candlelight, her exhausted eyes deceiving her. Then the shadow turned and glided, not walking but sliding, toward the stairs and vanished into the darkness below. Marianne slammed the door and pressed her back against it, breath coming in short gasps. Her hands shook uncontrollably. The headache flared into a sharp, stabbing pain behind her eyes. She stumbled to the bed and sat heavily, gripping the blankets as if they might anchor her to reality. "It was nothing," she whispered. "A shadow, a servant, nothing." But the words rang hollow. Somewhere in the house, the crying began again. Morning came slowly, dragging itself over the horizon like something wounded. Marianne had not slept. She had lain stiff and awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. The crying faded some time before dawn, but the damage remained. Her nerves felt frayed, stretched tight. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind made her flinch. When Ruth knocked and entered with the morning tray, she found her mistress already awake, sitting by the window with dark circles carved beneath her eyes. Marianne's hair hung loose and tangled. Her hands twisted restlessly in her lap. "Good morning, ma'am," Ruth said carefully, setting the tray down. She read Marianne's moods like weather signs, subtle shifts that warned of storms. Marianne did not answer right away. She watched the first workers move into the fields beneath the rising sun. Finally, she spoke without turning. "Did you hear anything last night?" Ruth hesitated. The question felt dangerous. "Hear what, ma'am?" "Crying. Someone crying in the house." Ruth's throat tightened. She had heard nothing from her small room, but she had felt something, a heaviness in the air. "No, ma'am," she said softly. "I didn't hear anything." Marianne's fingers stilled, her jaw tightening. "Of course you didn't," she muttered. She stood abruptly. "Tell my husband I won't be joining him for breakfast. I have a headache." Ruth nodded and retreated quickly. On the stairs, she nearly collided with Lydia coming up from the dining room, worry etched on her face. "Ruth," Lydia said gently, catching her arm, "is my sister unwell?" "She says she has a headache, ma'am. She won't be down for breakfast." Lydia frowned. "She's been strange since yesterday. Distracted, irritable. Last night I thought I heard something like someone weeping." "Did you?" The moral end of this story is that power without humanity destroys both the oppressed and the one who holds it. Cruelty dismissed as routine does not vanish simply because it is ignored. Laughter at another person's suffering becomes a debt that time alone cannot erase. True justice does not always arrive through laws or authority. Sometimes it rises from the voices that were silenced, forcing recognition where denial once lived. Redemption does not come from fear or punishment, but from seeing, acknowledging, and honoring the humanity that was denied. When people finally confront the pain their comfort was built upon, change becomes possible, but only after the truth is faced and carried forward. "No, ma'am," Ruth said quickly. "I heard nothing." Lydia studied her, then nodded. "Very well, thank you." Lydia climbed the stairs and knocked softly on Marianne's door before opening it. Marianne stood at the wash basin, splashing cold water on her face with trembling hands. Seeing Lydia in the mirror, her expression hardened. "I did not invite you in," Marianne said coldly. "You look terrible." Lydia replied, closing the door behind her. "What's wrong? And don't tell me it's just a headache." For a moment Marianne's mask slipped. Her shoulders sagged. "I heard something last night," she said quietly, crying, like it was inside the walls. Lydia inhaled sharply. "I heard it too." "It was not the servants," Marianne snapped, the vulnerability gone. "It was something else." "What that girl said before she died," Lydia began gently. "Do not," Marianne cut in. "But what if it's real?" Lydia pressed. "What if it's nothing?" Marianne shouted. "She was a dying slave speaking nonsense. There is no curse. There is no magic." She stopped, fists clenched. "There is only my household, and I will not allow superstition to destroy it." Lydia fell silent, but doubt remained. Marianne saw it and burned with anger. "Leave me," she said. "I need to dress." Alone, Marianne stared at her reflection. The woman looking back seemed unfamiliar, pale and hollow-eyed. She forced herself straight. She would not be undone by shadows and whispers. Yet a flicker of movement at the edge of the mirror caught her eye. She spun around, heart pounding. Nothing was there. Nothing was. The day dragged on. Marianne forced herself through letters, accounts, a brief walk in the garden. Everything felt tilted, wrong. At midday the overseer spoke of harvest numbers, but her mind drifted to the crying, the shadow. Elsie's face twisted with pain and fury. That evening she insisted on dining with the family. Charles talked business with a guest. The food tasted like ash. Lydia watched Marianne's grey pallor, the nervous darting of her eyes. When a servant approached, Marianne flinched so sharply Charles paused. "My dear, are you well?" he asked, irritation outweighing concern. "Perfectly," Marianne lied. After dinner she retreated to the drawing-room. Lydia followed. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking clock. "It's getting worse," Lydia said. "I don't know what you mean," Marianne replied. "Yes, you do." Exhaustion eroded Marianne's defenses. Lydia took her hand. Slowly, the words spilled out, the crying, the shadow, the sense of being watched, doors slamming, the metallic taste, and the dreams, red water, hands clawing from the earth, Elsie's face whispering words that sank into bone. When she finished, the room felt heavy. "We need to do something," Lydia whispered. "What?" Marianne demanded. "If you admit she had power," Marianne said softly, "then everything I believe collapses." "Perhaps it already is," Lydia said. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Ruth burst in, panicked. "Ma'am, you need to come. Something's wrong." They rushed upstairs. Marianne stopped in the doorway of her bedroom. The room was destroyed, not violently, but deliberately. Drawers emptied, bedding twisted, the mirror cracked, and on the walls, written in ash or soot, were the same strange words Elsie had spoken, repeated over and over. Marianne collapsed backward into Lydia's arms. "Make it stop," she whispered, but no one knew how. Let her over because her normally graceful handwriting appeared shaky and uneven. By mid-afternoon, her irritation had curdled into something far darker. She snapped at the housekeeper over a crooked curtain. She scolded a servant for bringing lemonade that was not cold enough. Every small flaw scraped against her nerves like grit on raw skin. Yet underneath the anger lived something she refused to name: unease. That evening, as the sun dipped low and brushed the sky with reds and burning orange, Marianne sat in the drawing-room with Lydia. Her sister had been unusually quiet all day, her gaze drifting again and again toward the windows, as if expecting something to appear outside. Now, as shadows stretched long across the room, Lydia finally spoke. "Marianne, about yesterday, that girl by the pond." Marianne's jaw tightened. "What about her? The thing she said before she died?" Lydia hesitated, selecting her words with care. "Do you think there could be something to it?" Marianne let out a short laugh that sounded sharp and forced even to her own ears. "You cannot be serious." "I'm not saying I believe it," Lydia said quickly, "but people talk about these things. Curses, hexes, old superstitions carried over. Superstitions, Marianne cut in sharply, are for the ignorant and the weak-minded. That girl was delirious with fever. She spoke nonsense because her mind failed along with her body. There is nothing more to it. Lydia lowered her eyes to her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Of course," she said softly. "You're right." But the words lingered in the air, thin and unconvincing. Marianne saw the doubt in her sister's eyes, and it irritated her more than the pounding headache, more than the strange taste in her tea, more than the door that had slammed for no reason at all. Doubt was dangerous. It slipped in like water through cracks, widening them, weakening certainty until nothing felt stable. "I am going to bed," Marianne announced abruptly as she stood. "This heat is unbearable." Lydia nodded, watching as her sister swept from the room, silk skirts whispering against the polished floor. When Marianne was gone, Lydia remained seated, staring into the candlelight. Outside, the plantation settled into its nightly rhythms, low voices from the quarters, insects humming, an owl calling in the distance. Yet beneath those familiar sounds, Lydia thought she heard something else, a faint whisper, barely audible, like breath moving through walls. She shivered and pulled her shawl closer. Upstairs, Marianne prepared for bed with Ruth's help, allowing the maid to loosen her corset and brush her hair. The routine was familiar, grounding, a sequence of motions repeated so often they required no thought. Tonight, though, every touch felt wrong. The brush snagged. The nightgown felt too tight around her neck. When Ruth finally left and closed the door softly behind her, Marianne climbed into bed and stared up at the canopy. Sleep would not come. She twisted beneath the sheets, fabric tangling around her legs. Each time she closed her eyes, images flared behind her lids. The dying girl by the pond, lips moving in that unrecognizable language, the dark smear of blood on the earth, the way the air had thickened and pressed down like weight. Marianne forced her eyes open and shook her head as if she could dislodge the thoughts. "Foolishness," she whispered into the dark, but the dark gave no reply. Hours slipped past. The candle burned low, wax pooling thick at its base. Somewhere a clock struck midnight. Marianne was still awake, her heart racing too quickly, her skin prickling with a feeling she could not name. She told herself it was the heat, the heavy Georgia summer pressing in. Then she heard it, a sound, faint and distant, like someone weeping. It came from deep within the house, or perhaps from outside, carried on the night air. Marianne slowly sat upright, listening. It came again, clearer now, a soft keening wail that rose and fell, broken and mournful. Her first thought was that one of the servants was grieving Elsie. That made sense. Grief left unchecked could spill into the night. She would speak to the overseer in the morning. But as the sound continued, something felt wrong. It was not coming from the quarters. It was closer, far closer. It seemed to rise from within the walls themselves. Marianne's breath caught. She swung her legs over the bed, bare feet touching the cool wood. For a moment she considered calling for Ruth, but pride stopped her. She would not be the sort of woman who trembled at strange sounds. She crossed to the door and opened it slowly, peering into the dark hall. The crying stopped.